In this lesson, we're going to take a look at some 3D modeling basics in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and launch Photoshop. Again, if you're following along on a Mac, go ahead and go to your Finder window and then go to Applications and launch Photoshop from there. And I'm going to go ahead and open up or create a new document. And I'm going to set it up to be 1920 by 1080. High resolution, and I'll set up the background to be transparent. I'm going to call this controller. Now the reason I'm calling it controller is because, continuing the gaming theme, I'm going to be designing a controller. So what I did was I just went to Google and looked up just a controller, and I found a couple of images. This happens to be a JPEG, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that in here. And what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and crop this. And to do that, because it's a smart image, I double clicked on the file and it brought up this the ability to edit our smart object. So I'm going to crop it down. Because I just want the controller itself. And then we'll save that. And now I'm left with the image that I want. What I'm also going to be doing is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the white area so I can wrap this around my design once I have the shape for my controller. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab this area here. So I rasterize that and then delete. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that A as well. All right. Good. So now I have a pretty good shape for me to start building from. What I'm going to do first is to go through several different stages of modeling and several different ways to model in Photoshop. I'm first going to use the pen tool to create an outline around the shape of the controller, and that's going to be my first layer. I'm going to wrap this image directly onto that layer, and then what I'm going to be doing is building up the analog sticks here, and we'll use a similar technique with that, where we're going to be using the pen tool and we're going to be rotating this shape. I'll show you how that's done. And then we're just going to be extruding the layers for the buttons themselves. And that will be pretty quick and pretty easy. But the end result should be pretty good. The first shape here is probably the most intimidating because it has a lot of really strange angles, bizarre depth and changing. So we're not going to make it perfect. It's not going to be exactly the same as the actual controller, but it's going to be pretty close, crude but close. So let's go ahead and get started. For this, I'm going to go ahead and grab my pen tool, and the pen tool is going to allow me to make some basic shapes and create an outline around this. So let me zoom in. Let's start here. I thought I selected my pen tool. I guess I didn't. I'm going to start here and with that first bend. And usually when I anticipate any type of bend is usually where I place my pen points for my Bezier curves. So I can set up a next curve here. I'm going to go ahead and send the next angle by holding down the Alt key down out this way. And you can drag that out to any which direction you want. And what that does is it prepares the next angle to start moving in that direction, be it harsh. Typically, Bezier curves move in very nice, smooth transitions, but I want a harsh angle here, so I'm going to drop it right here. And now I'm going to continue my angle around this way. I'm not going to follow this button here. I'm going to leave that for a separate edition. So what I'm going to be doing is I guess we can get pretty fine here. I'll put a point here, and then I'll put a point here, and we'll drag that out. Again, preparing for the next angle here, I'm going to hold down Alt and then drag my curve to start this way, and that looks pretty good. And what I'll do is, this is just one curve, so I can just go to where I'm going to be preparing for another curve, and that's all the way to about, let's go to here so we can make this one curve itself. I'll go to right about here. That's close enough. And we'll prepare that to go right about there. And then we'll make another little curve right here. I guess we can go to about, let's go to pretty equal with that. Right about here. Drag that down and out. And we'll prepare that angle. And then we'll go to another angle here. And then here, and then again another pretty harsh angle, and right to there, straight line through here, another angle, change the direction. And then what you want to do is to keep things symmetrical. Remember where you placed your points along the other side. We could have worked in symmetry, but for this particular design, I'm going to build out the entire shell of the controller one by one in the entire thing, and then we'll extrude the entire design. So matching this side, I'm right around here. That angle's good, and then we have another angle right around here. This angle right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this in this direction here, but then I'm going to adjust this, just this one angle itself. And that's me still holding down the Alt key. I'm going to go back over here and click on this one. And drag this out a little bit further. Adjust that a little bit. Better, not perfect, but it's better. Okay, we'll continue up. So matching this side, the next angle is all the way up here. Looks pretty good. And then we have this little angle we're going to meet right here, so I want to set up that direction. And we'll drop that right around there. And then we'll finish up this shape. Okay, good. So I like that. That looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's once we go in 3D. This harsh edge here, you won't notice that. It'll look a lot better in 3D, believe it or not. So what we want to do now is, with our 3D panel available down here, we just want to go to 3D, and we want to take our, not our selected layer. I mean, that would work actually, but we want more specifically the work path. Because we used our pen tool, we have this work path created, so we have to make a work path extrusion. So we'll go ahead and create that. and immediately it doesn't look very good, right? We have a lot of work to do. From our top view here, this is way too long, nothing like that of a realistic controller. The way that our image, our JPEG, wrapped to our 3D design, it's pretty cool, and it helps create a little bit of an effect, but still not what we're looking for. So we have quite a bit of work ahead of us. So let's go ahead, and the first thing we're going to want to do is reduce the overall length or the Z depth of this particular image or design. So let's go ahead and go to, we could change that here in our mesh. We can change the extrusion depth here. But what I want to do more specifically is in deform, I'm going to change it here, but we're still going to maybe fine adjust it after we go through and change that of our caps. So I'm going to reduce my extrusion down to almost nothing, believe it or not. And the reason I'm doing that is because our caps are going to have some length to them. So that looks pretty good. I know it looks really thin up here in our selector view, but I'll show you why I'm doing this in just a second here. So if we go over to our cap mode, here we have the ability to change the contour of the front, the back, or both at the same time. What I'm going to be doing is adjusting more specifically the front right now. Let's go ahead and go with front and back. And then we'll adjust, fine-tune the back in just a moment. So we'll go with front and back. I'm going to go with this angle right here, just a very simple rounded edge. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the width. We're going to bring that out just a little bit, and we'll keep an eye up here on our selector view in the top left. So this is where we're going to really get the depth that we're looking for and start building out that shape that we want for our controller. And that looks pretty good right there. Let me go ahead and take a look around. Now again, it's not perfect, right? We know it's not perfect. We know that an actual controller has, throughout this region here, it kind of like scoops in a little bit, and this gets a little bit more rounded, and then this gets recessed, and then there's like the whole touchpad through here, or LCD, whatever it's going to be in the future. But there's a separate piece here, and I'm not going to be building it to that accuracy. We would have to do, and we're going to be using many different layers to build out this design as it is right now. But in order to get that level of depth and accuracy through the angles up here, through the grip, through the hand, all the way underneath over here, like that rounds in a little bit. To get all those different angles, we would have had to have maybe made 1, 2, 3, I would say 3 to 4 different pieces just for the controller itself. Maybe even more considering the backside, how it kind of like, it jets out a little bit further. So no, I mean, I guess it's pretty symmetrical. So I would say 3 or 4 pieces, we would have been able to build this perfectly, but for the sake of time, it wouldn't be anything new within doing that. You wouldn't learn anything more by taking the extra time to make it more thorough. So we'll just keep it at this. This is fine. I'm gonna go ahead and change my view back to front. And just to make this symmetrical, so I'll go into my front and okay, good. So now what we're going to be doing is adding additional layers to build out our D-pad, our buttons, and then we'll make also that of our analog sticks and our pause, start, whatever these 2 buttons are up here. We'll make those as well. So let's go ahead and go back to our layer, and we'll create a new layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, let's do our buttons first. So pretty much any one of these tools here, be it a paintbrush or pen tool, anything you wanted to do to make that selection, you can make extrusions in 3D based on the layer itself or based on the selection. I'm going to work within making shapes. This will make it really easy for me to copy and paste and work with them and still have some real accuracy with Bezier curves, believe it or not. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this, And we'll go ahead and adjust this around holding down Shift. The color gray is fine. Actually, let's make this a little bit different of a color. Let's make this, I don't know, let's make our buttons blue. That's pretty cool. All right, so I'll go ahead and start dragging out my shape. I'll move that into place. That's good. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And copy again. And I'll copy one more time. All right, good. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new shape. That should make a new layer for me. If it doesn't, I'll put it on a different layer. That way I can make multiple different extrusions and 3D shapes from different layers. Which one do I want to use? Let's go ahead and this should work out okay. We'll try this one first. Yeah, I made a new layer for me. So now what I want to do is bring these angles. It's gonna give me a warning, I know. That's fine. Change my opacity a little bit. Okay, I rather like that. Looks pretty good. So now what we can do is we can copy and paste that multiple times and create our D-pad. And change my opacity back. Oops. Looks pretty uniform. And we're going to leave the analog sticks to last. The reason being is because it's a totally different approach to what we're doing right now with the buttons. Grab the ellipse tool. No, I guess I'll do another rounded rectangle for these shapes up here. Try and get kind of a symmetrical pill shape. Looks pretty good, pretty symmetrical. Okay, yeah, I rather like that. And what we'll do is we'll just copy that. And put that right there. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to extrude these now. Hopefully the blue looks nice when it's in 3D. Might look stupid, we'll see. So to do that, again, we go over to, let me zoom in for you. We're going to go over to our 3D panel. And in here, we're not going to use a work path, but we're going to use that of the selected layers. So let me just make sure, yeah, we're just going to do the start select button right now. And then we're going to create that. And let me zoom back out. And now we have our buttons. And they're way too long, so we're going to make those smaller. I don't love that color, but it's okay. At least we can see it. At least there's a difference between the buttons and the gray controller now. So let me go over to, again, we're going to round it out with the cap, but let me reduce the depth a little bit. That's good. And then let me zoom in over here so you can see this as well. And so again, these are our different properties that we can adjust the model with. We have our mesh, we have our deform, and that's where I just changed the depth or the extrusion here. You can also do that in here in our mesh, but that's just only just the extrusion depth. But I wanted to do it, it doesn't really matter which way you do it. You can do it in this one or this one. But now that I've reduced that, the depth a little bit, I'm going to change that of the front of the cap. So that's just going to be the front, not both front and back this time, but just the front more specifically. And I'm going to change the contour to a rounded contour and adjust that out a little bit. Let me zoom out so we can see a little bit better what's going to happen here, because I'm going to be paying attention to my top view of my buttons. And so I'll increase that a little bit. It's just the front. That looks good, like that. All right, so that one's done. We're gonna go on to our next layer, and that's gonna be our D-pad, and we'll go into our 3D, and then again, I'll zoom in so you can see, we're just changing this to be a 3D extrusion from the selected layer, and we'll create that. And pretty much the exact same process, rinse and repeat. We're gonna go over to our extrusion depth, reduce that drastically, and we're gonna go ahead and round that out. We could do something a little bit more aggressive, but I'm gonna continue just the same trend. The front, we're just going to make a little bit more rounded. Good. And then one more, we just have our buttons to do, and let's go ahead and go back to our layers, switch over to those, and then we'll go back to 3D, and then we'll create that. And now we have our buttons, and we're gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna go to our deform, we're gonna reduce the depth. And let me zoom out so I can see. We'll keep a little extra length there, so when we start bringing all these shapes together, we have a little bit more leeway for the depth, and I'll show you how that works in just a second. So I'm gonna leave it like that, but I do want to change the cap, and I do want to round these out a little bit. Not as much as the D-pad, but a little bit. Right there, beautiful. Okay, good. So now we just have to do our analog sticks. And let's go ahead and go back to our layers over here. Let's create a new layer, and I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna make these other layers invisible. Now the reason I made those invisible is so that I can feel comfortable designing and just have a better, cleaner slate to design our buttons. And so once we design our button, we're only going to design a very strange half of it, but we're going to rotate it 360 degrees. So let me show you how that works. We're going to use our pen tool again, and think about what an analog stick looks like. It's kind of looks like a mushroom. So we're going to go right here. And I'm going to come up. Let me adjust that because I want it to be straight. And then what I want is I want it to kind of like flower out. And then we want it to be like a rounded top. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess we can do like a little bit of an angle. And then flower out. Adjust that straight. How big do we want it? Right there. And then we're going to round this and then do the top of the cap or the analog stick. So we make that round. Good. And then we're going to be going straight. And we're going to go to about here so we can close this. Looks pretty straight. We're going to come down. And we're going to close that. Now, I know that looks pretty silly. And you're probably thinking that's not what an analog stick looks like. And I agree. That looks nothing like it. But imagine a dissection, or imagine the analog stick dissected, where you slice just like a quarter of it. And then what we're going to do is wrap this 360 degrees. Use my work path and go ahead and make a 3D extrusion. I'll go ahead and create that. And so again, you're thinking this looks nothing like it's supposed to. And so let me show you what we're gonna do with this. We're going to, let me zoom in over here so you can see better. We're going to go over to, let's adjust it by the outside angle for the axis. And let's go over to here and deform. The depth is too far, and we'll adjust that in a second, but what we want specifically is the horizontal angle and a bend. And what we're going to do is rotate that, and you can choose the degree that you're rotating, and we want 360 degrees. So let me zoom out so you can see what's happening here. So I want to zoom, or I want to rotate all the way around. So I want to drag this over, and that starts building out my button that I want, my analog. So that actually looks pretty good. That's, for the most part, exactly what I wanted, aside from this centerpiece here. So what we have to do is reduce our extrusion. And I'm looking at my selector mode up here, trying to be able to see better, trying to close that gap a little bit. Or as much as possible, really. And try and make it seem consistent to be a believable analog stick. So the center, where it rotates on that, it's actually pretty thick. I'm going to say it looks something pretty close to that right there. Now let's see if we can make any more adjustments. That might be a little bit better with the shape preset. Let me go back to my deform and let me rotate that again. A little bit better. Well, I think that's about as close as I'm going to get it. That's okay, I'm happy with it. So now I have that. Now all I need to do is I I could duplicate the layer, but I'm not going to do that yet. Let me go back to my layers here. Let me make my other layers visible. And I'm just going to bring this into place a little bit, not much. And we'll adjust it once we merge everything. Right there should be pretty good. I'll make one more. Call this analog 2. Okay, now all we have to do is just bring all these layers together. And to do that, all we have to do is, you could just use the top one, and then everything beneath the top layer that you merge will all merge into one. I don't know why, but I'm just in the habit of selecting all of them, and then I merge. You don't actually have to do that, but I just always do it. I just always feel like, for some reason, if I don't select them all, it may miss one or something. I don't know. But you don't have to do that. You can just select the topmost one and then go to the option menu over here and then go to merge layers. And that brings them all into one layer then. Now that looks a little bit off, but what we have to do is go ahead and select our controller and then just push that back a little bit. I'm going to go to my top view. And then just adjust that back. Rotate a little bit. And then there's all of our elements. And do you see why I made everything a little bit longer than it really needed to be? And that's just so I had a little bit of extra room here, because I knew adjusting all the shapes together was going to be a little bit tricky. The only one that's really off though is just this other analog stick. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you still have individual axis control. So I'm going to just adjust that. And let me go to a top view here. Adjust this one. These buttons are pretty far out. Pop those in a little bit. And bring that in as well. Oops. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at where the positions are. A little bit off here, so we'll adjust that. Adjust that. These buttons are pretty close. I think that looks pretty good. Let's rotate around, check it out. Yeah, not perfect, but not bad at all. I typically, for these analog sticks, I would have just made another button similar to this and played with the extrusions and some of the rounding options that I would have had for the caps. And I would have actually had them looking better because I wouldn't have that little spot in the center. But that's okay. I just wanted to at least demonstrate how to rotate that 360 degrees to build that shape. But that's it. So go ahead and experiment. Now that you know some of the basic modeling techniques and tools, you can build pretty much anything. It's just a matter of, the more complex it is, typically the more models you have to make and then bring them together. And then don't forget that you have to render as well. So this is not rendered yet, but I'll spare you the time. And all you have to do is just you click on the render button. It would probably take about 7 minutes to render for me right now. But again, experiment. If you ever need to do that of like mock-ups, professional mock-ups, putting textures in your designs and or the client's design on something 3D like this really makes it look very professional. Really builds up a nice professional resume if you just have something like that available. And then people tend to be super impressed by 3D. So if they see something in 3D and they ask you, you know, where'd you get this design or how'd you get your design in there, you can tell them you modeled it, you designed it yourself, and you created the 3D models. So very impressive. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you, and tune in for the next lesson.